All right. It is Tuesday night, which means I got my guy Sunil with me. And I don't know if there's a show that I look more forward to each week than the one with Sunil. There's so much to talk about. News about Bosa broke just a couple hours ago. We got the preseason game to finally get past and move forward. We got Brock Purdy fully healthy, ready to go. So there's a lot to discuss, and we're going to talk about it all next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. And like I said, it is Tuesday, and I got my guy, So Real, Stu Neal in the building. What's up, Sunil?
Living the dream, my man. Glad to see 49er football is back, much like 49er football and Twitter is electric.
Well, I don't know if you want to call 49er football back after that performance. I thought that was awful to watch. Definitely hard to see. Although there was some things that came out of it. We'll definitely talk about that. But I think the news right now has to be centered around one Nick Bosa. And last week we talked about it. Neither of us were even close to hitting the panic button. I think we both basically said if they get through the preseason, I said if they get through the preseason, then I'll start to get a little worried. You're like, listen, as long as he's there like 2 or 3 days before week 1, like I'm ready to go. I don't care. However, and you can walk us through that because you saw the report, but it sounds like this thing might linger into the season all of a sudden. What the hell's going on here? What exactly is being said about Nick Bosa?
Yeah, so dang, I should have kept it up. But basically, I'm gonna pull it up right now. Sorry for being so unprepared. But here we go. So it's a report.
It's rinky-dink around here. We're good.
You get breaking news from this guy over here. All right. So this is according to Tony Pauline. So it says the contract situation between the reigning Defensive Player of the Year, Nick Bosa, and the San Francisco 49ers is, quote, complicated. And he could miss the start of the season due to contract dispute. Sources say there's been very little communication between the player representatives and their respective teams. So, and it goes on to say Bosa is looking to match or exceed the biggest deal of all time for a defensive player, and this could last a while per the report. So, obviously, we both saw what the defense looked like without starters. I think that the most important starter on the defensive side probably is the Defensive Player of the Year, right? So not having Bosa out there for the beginning of the season, it is an issue. Now, I'm not the one that usually panics and things like that, but the thing about this seems like it's not the 49er issue. It seems like it's a Bosa thing. And there are quite a few defensive linemen that are free agents right now that are doing in the same holding pattern that Nick Bosa is in, that all believe they should be the highest paid defensive player in the league. And I think that's what's holding it back more is one of these, shoes has to drop, and everybody's being really patient from a player perspective as far as who is going to take that leap. So to me, I think Bosa, we both know the Bosa family and the Bosa lineage, they're not going to break. If they say this is their goal, that's what their goal is going to be. I don't think they're going to take any kind of reduction or whatnot. I think at this point, either the 49ers might have to overpay to get him in or just kind of wait till, somebody else blinks, I guess, out of these defensive linemen.
I think the thing with Jones, though, is he's already said what he wants. He wants close to the deal that Donald has, where Bosa is saying he wants more, like equal to or more. Now, the Chiefs aren't going to pay Jones what Bosa gets. I would be hard pressed to believe that that's a possibility. So the 49ers really are kind of just going against themselves, in my opinion. However, we knew this was coming. We knew that Bosa was going to do this. We knew what the expectation was. So at this point, the 49ers are either willing to pay him this kind of money or they're not. And if they're not, then they should have really explored trading him in the offseason. They had to have known what this was going to look like. This is not a surprise. We were talking about this last offseason, when people were like, shouldn't they just sign Bosa now? And I was like, no, that you don't sign Bosa now because you can't sign Bosa. Bosa's going to bet on himself. And he did. And he played as good as he possibly could. And now he wants all of the money. We knew that that was going to happen. You know what I mean?
I think we knew that was going to happen, Jesse, but I think I don't think we thought it was going to go this long, right? I think the precedent was set. We all knew he was going to reset the market, and I would assume the 49ers aren't playing like ridiculous hardball where that number is not anywhere close, because at that point, I agree with you. If they're not going to pay that number that Bosa's team has set up, trade him, right? He's your most valuable asset probably on the team. And, you could have gotten a big haul for him. But it seems like maybe Bosa's holding, it seems like this is a Bosa thing. Like, I would assume that if I'm the 49ers, I would assume they've already put that number out there, and Bosa and his team is probably thinking they could get more, and that's why they're waiting. I don't know.
Ooh, I don't know. I don't think that they've put that number out there. I really don't. I think that they're trying to do what they've done with everybody else. They're trying to mess around with the guaranteed money, and Bosa's just not playing the game. He's not willing to do it. Now,
you know why I
don't know for
disagree?
sure.
You know why I disagree? Because it's saying that Bosa's team isn't in contact with the 49ers. So it looks like the 49ers can't do anything, right? Because it seems like that Bosa's team is just like, we're going to wait. Like, we're not going to talk to you till they probably told him we're waiting for this player to sign. After that, we'll talk money. And so I think that's more how I read what I read. It seems like the 49ers really don't have any leverage at this point. It's just Bosa, when he's ready to sign, he's going to sign type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility. Or maybe they just said, hey, this is what we're going to get paid. Don't call until you come with that number, and anything less, I'm not even going to present to my client. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's a possibility as well. Like, this isn't real estate. I got to imagine, in real estate, where if an offer comes through, even if it's like a slap in the face offer, the real estate agent has to present it to their client, like, legally. That's not the way that this works. So He's probably getting a bunch of really crappy offers from the 49ers, and he's like, no, this is what we're going to take, and until you do that, we're not talking. So there we go.
What do you think from a Bosa perspective? How long do you think he will hold out? Because one thing about Bosa is he loves football. So sure. I wonder at what point is his nerves like, dude, I want to play, and he wants to win, and he knows that his team he knows that he makes that team a lot better. And if it goes into week 1, week 2, week 3, you lose a couple of those games, that could be playoff seeding and be the deciding factor between the route you have going to the Super Bowl.
I don't think that Bosa will play a snap this season if he doesn't get the money that he expects.
Wow.
That's just me. I think he'll be that dug in, just based off of what we've seen from this family in the past and knowing what he's coming off of. If he doesn't think the money's right, he won't play a snap.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue that. Like, we haven't heard anything from Bosa's side, and is this the longest that it's gone in under this regime as far as a contract dispute?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. I can't think of anything else. I mean,
Kittle's, how long did Kittle's go?
I thought his was signed like right as training. It seems like it's kind of all of them linger until the training camp thing. But again, this is why I just have to go off the past, right? And I'm not saying that Bosa's not stubborn. We've talked about the Bosa family and how stubborn they are. But going off the past, the 49ers have played this game with everybody to the point where Debo requested a trade through his agent, to where Kittle's agent came out and called it the Valentine's Day massacre when they offered him a slap in the face deal, where Trent Williams had to call Kyle Shanahan and be like, listen, dude, I'm about to go to the Chiefs if you don't make this right. And then they made it right. So the 49ers play this game with everybody, and Bosa's just not the one. He's not playing any of the BS. He's not going to come out publicly. He's not going to request a trade. He's just going to sit there and wait until the money is offered right, and then he'll sign that contract. And until then, he'll keep working on his quads in Miami and or wherever he's from here in Florida. And, that's what he's going to do. So
you would think after that defensive line performance on Sunday, he would have been signed by Sunday night.
Oh, listen,
during the game.
you know as well as I do that every time that defensive line didn't get home, he was like, add another zero. Let's add another zero to that one.
Like, comma.
Exactly. Well, speaking of that game on Sunday, if that's what you want to call it, we've talked about a lot of things, and we'll talk about Trey Lance a little bit later because you and I haven't talked about it, and I'm curious your thoughts on it. But a couple other things that I think are very important, and really probably more important, that potentially came out of that game, and one of them is the roster depth or potential concerns with the roster depth. Now, the way that I saw it, the defensive line really couldn't get any movement, which was surprising to me because you look at the names that are across that second defensive line. I really thought, hey, they can go out and beat any second offensive line in the league. And then what's even more concerning to me, Sunil, is I watched that same defensive line in practice whip the second offensive line. And then the second offensive line gets whipped in the game, but the defensive line can't even get home. So really, how bad is that second unit offensive line that's getting whipped daily by the defensive line that can't get home in a game? So there's just a lot of things that came from it. I don't want to panic after game one. Who knows? They had 2 big practices prior to that game. What does it look like next week? But one of the things that the 49ers have been able to rest their laurels on in the past is that they've always had depth. And when players go down, it's okay, next man up, we trust them. That might not be the case this year if what we saw on Sunday is the true roster depth. What do you think about the roster depth? Is there a concern for you? Talk me off the ledge because I know you're about to, so go ahead.
Absolutely. This is why we have this Tuesday night show, is because we have all the pessimism where Jesse's been in his spaces and on his Twitter or X or whatever it's called right now, and they all that echo chamber just talk themselves into and wild takes, Kyle Shanahan needs to be this, and the team's already failed, and oh my God, like all of a sudden this team went from 13 wins to are they even gonna win one game? So there's a reason why backups are backups, and there's a reason why starters are starters. Jesse, tell me, when has been the point where every single starter went down on the defense and every single backup player had to play without any starters mixed into them?
Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl 2 years ago is the only thing I can think of, the offensive line.
So and even then there was starters still there mixed in that offensive line. It wasn't just 5 new players that go in. The game that we just watched on Sunday was every single backup, guys that probably might not even be on the team, when the season starts, without a single starter, right? And the level of starter that we're saying is missing, Jesse, aren't just rotation players. We're talking about all pro level starters that are in there. Now, when you get called all pro, Jesse, do you think you make the game easier or harder for the people that are on the field with you?
Oh, way harder. Yeah, clearly.
So a defensive line that are mixed with, these second and third string guys that definitely didn't look great on their own, right? I think Farrell got a sack. He looked like, he had some juice in a couple of plays against his former team and whatnot. But whomever those guys are being mixed in, there's going to be a Bosa, Armstead, or Hargrave out there at all times. One of those three are always going to be out there, or two of those three are always going to be on the field at one point or another. And that's who the offensive line is going to be geared towards. So these backup players aren't going to be seeing the same type of looks that they were seeing in this game. They're going to be seeing isolated one-on-ones where they can have a chance to play against players that aren't paying attention to them, right? The secondary is going to have a Mooney Ward, a Funga, Diamador Lenore. We know the linebackers are always going to have elite players there. It's not the same. And then go to the offense, same thing, right? When we're talking about the players that we're missing, we're talking about all pro talent. We're talking about Debo, CMC, Juszczyk, Kittle, Trent Williams. Like the levels between who was on the field and who wasn't on the field is insane. So to look at this and be like, we have no depth, we don't need 24, 30 players of depth. We just need one or two from each position that can go in and be part of a rotation, be effective, be productive, maybe come in for a game or two here and there when players are dinged up. And I think that we have that type of depth. I think that this is an overreaction to think we ever had the type of depth where our second team could just come in and dominate. I don't think we've ever had that on as the 49ers, and we've always had really, really deep teams.
Yeah, they definitely have. I guess the question becomes this, and it's something that I talked about really early in the offseason, and I'm not even saying that it's gotten to this point yet. Maybe it has. I mean, if it continues to look like this, then it's definitely gotten to this point. But my point is that they spent a lot of capital on Trey Lance, which for whatever reason we want to paint, that capital is not being put to use right now. Okay. So you've put all that capital there. That is the capital you needed to continue to replenish the cupboard. You look at what the Philadelphia Eagles were able to do. They lost a lot of talent, but in one draft, because they had so many picks, they were able to replenish the cupboard and stay cheap while paying their, top 10 quarterback. You look at the 49ers, who are now not paying a top 10 quarterback, but they're paying a lot of guys top tier money. They basically are paying for a top tier quarterback, even though the quarterback room is cheap. And they haven't had picks because of the Trey Lance thing, because of the CMC trade. How do you replenish things when they're running low if you don't have the high-end picks to go and do so? So at some point, like, that's going to catch up to you. I'm not saying it's right now. It certainly looks like it after Sunday, but we still have a couple more preseason games. We don't know exactly, why things happened the way they happened. But I just think that time is coming sooner rather than later. And when it happens, a lot of times it catches you by surprise. You have a lot of assumptions of what a team is going to be, what the depth's going to look like, how good certain players are. And then all of a sudden, one player ages a little bit quicker than you thought. The depth isn't there anymore, and everything falls apart overnight. So I think it's something to monitor in these next two preseason games. Like, to me, I know all the talk is going to be about, Trey Lance, Sam Darnold, or Brock Purdy when he finally gets out there. Really, I want to see what the depth of this team looks like, because that's what's going to be important. It's a war of attrition for these teams throughout the regular season. And especially if you don't get the number one seed, it's even worse as you head into the playoffs. I am so curious to see this offensive and defensive second units going forward. And I just hope that they can make the improvements that they're really going to need in order to win this season, in my opinion.
And once again, Jesse totally missed the whole point that I said. Clearly just matrixed his way around that, because once again, I'm telling you, you can't have a good judge of what this talent is going to be or how good this depth is, because they're playing with other people that may or may not even make the team. What I'm saying is, I think this depth will be more.
Right, but they're playing against people that may or may not make the Raiders, which are a far worse team. Am I wrong?
I think that one thing is that a lot of people are downplaying the Raiders because of the division that they're in. Like the Raiders defense has always been pretty solid. They've had a pretty solid pass rush the past few years. They have some talent there in the secondary. They've drafted high for a long time as well. Like I don't think that the Raiders are necessarily like Super Bowl contenders or, even playoff contenders possibly, but they also are in one of the better divisions in the league, and they still won. They weren't the number one draft pick. You know what I mean? They still won quite a few games last year, even though they were using backup quarterbacks, brand new coach, all that kind of stuff. So I think that we look at the Raiders like they're the worst team in the league, and that's not accurate at all.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
No.
So to me, I look at it and I think that, am I saying that this depth is A1 is the best depth that we've ever had? Not necessarily, but I am saying that what we're looking and judging is not what we're going to be asking the depth pieces to do. So I think that in their role, you know what I mean? Like in their role, they will be fine. We're asking them to look like starters right now, and clearly none of them are going to look like starters because otherwise they would be a starter on the team. You know what I mean? That's not what we're looking for from our depth to have that starter level ability. We're looking for our depth to be able to spot duty in a rotation or, be able to come in and not let go of the rope type of thing.
Yeah, I just think when you're going up against players that are in a similar situation as you, like the playing field was even. It's not like the Raiders starters were out there and then they had to overcome that. I'd be like, okay, well, obviously, and it sounds like Denver played their starters well into the second quarter against the Jets. They may do the same thing, or not against the Jets, whoever they played, Washington, I think, Arizona. I don't even remember. Either way, it sounds like they might do the same thing against San Francisco. If the 49ers play their second unit and they're playing their first unit, okay, I can understand the conversation, but it was even second unit versus second unit. And I would say, especially when I look at the Raiders offensive line, their offensive line was not good last year, period. Their starting offensive line. So even if they've improved that a little bit, I would imagine their second offensive line is not that great. And guys like Givens, Kinlaw, Clelin Ferrell, I would think those guys would be able to perform at a pretty decent level in that game. And I saw the opposite. Now, again, that's just one game. But to me, that now has become the real storyline going into this next offseason game and the one after that. Because unlike Trey Lance or Sam Darnold, whatever, really, they just need one of those guys to pan out and be good enough to play in case Brock Purdy goes down, hopefully. But depth on the defensive line is like, these guys actually do play every single game. Now, they may only get 5 to 10 snaps, but they're going to play a lot of these guys rotationally. So if they can't even beat the guy in front of them that is on a similar level to them week in and week out, that does get a little bit concerning, I believe.
It could. I mean, look, I also know that
I trust our starters. I know our starters are good, Cineo, right? And when we talk about like the 49ers offensive line with McKivitz, one thing that you have not heard from me is me panicking about McKivitz starting. I've said the same thing all offseason, which is surprising because normally it's like you telling me, hey, not a big deal. The offensive line is going to be good. But for this whole offseason, what have I said? Hey, I actually think the offensive line can be better even with McKivitz because the three interior guys, they're going to take a step forward going into their second year starting. The offensive line should be fine. However, if they have to start getting into some of those secondary guys, that's where it does start to get a little bit concerning. So go ahead.
Yeah, and look, I've obviously been a 49er fan for a long time. I've paid attention more closely since we've been doing content creation over the last few years. And one thing that I don't think we've ever said is, damn, these backups look great during preseason games. Like, I don't think I've ever had a conversation with you about, man, this team looks ready to go or whatever. Like, we know the team during practice, the team during preseason games, and even, in the beginning of the season doesn't necessarily look the way that they look, 8 games into the season where they rattle off their win streak or whatever the case may be. To me, I just think that the level of play with the starters versus the starters with the backups in there, is just different, man. I think this team is definitely top heavy to say. I mean, I would admit that we're top heavy. Our top tier talent is elite of the elite, but that's just the way we're built right now. And we have a few years. We have some guys that are second year players or rookies right now that are gonna be that in 2-3 years from now. But right now, our team is built mainly off of the starting 22, and we have some guys behind there that I think builds that out to 30, 35 players that can help you win games on a consistent level.
Yeah, I guess like for me, especially along the defensive line, I had a little bit higher expectations. I've really been saying like what I saw in practice. Now the context is that these guys that we're going against are second offensive line, which all right, maybe not so good, right? But some of those guys, the Kinlaws, the Givens, the Farrells, just that those types of players were winning a lot. Taco Charlton, those types of players were winning a lot during practice reps. And so I was like, you know what? I think the depth might be okay along this defensive line. It may not be 15 deep like it was a year or two ago, what have you, but I do think that they got a good solid 4 coming off the bench. And as soon as Bosa's back, they're going to be good. I don't know about that now. So maybe my expectations were a little higher of the defensive line than what they should have been. Maybe they're right in line and they'll prove me right this next week. But like I said, I just believe that this now has become the story as we head into week 2 and 3 of the preseason.
Also, it's a brand new defensive coordinator coming from outside the organization for the first time in this regime, right?
For sure.
there could be a learning curve there as well. As far as how Steve Wilkes called the game, I didn't really see too many issues with his play calling, but it's different situation. So I'm not panicking. I personally think that this team is going to be fine. This is just normal 49er fodder in the off season. We always have this panic mode before the season starts.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. Bass Spokane Niner says, did you see JT O'Sullivan's breakdown? Interesting. Yeah, of course, man. JT O'Sullivan's the deal. I had him on the channel. I love JT. Super nice guy. Definitely did see his breakdown. I agreed really with most of it. So I did a breakdown here. Obviously, it's not near as in-depth. I don't put the time in to break down the film or even know what I'm looking at the level that he does. But for the most part, I agreed with him. I gave Trey a C-. So, yeah, there definitely was some things that it's like, man, if he doesn't clean that up, it's concerning. There was definitely some really good throws in there. Also true that there wasn't a lot of help going on around him. So, I like I said, for the most part, I actually agree with what he was saying. Green Glass Full says, bruh, Trey isn't good, Jesse. No narcs allowed. Isn't a narc like somebody that like tells on somebody? That's what I always thought a narc was growing up.
I thought it had something to do with drugs.
Narcotics? Like narcotics?
Like, yeah, I thought it was, I don't know. Look, I'm not from the streets. I can't.
Yeah, for me, I mean, a narc was always somebody that like snitched on someone. So I don't know what that has to do with Trey Lance. I'm a little confused. CB Niners says, I've been a member for 7 months. What's up, CB Niners? Appreciate that. Did we game plan? Raiders for sure did. Yeah, I think things are pretty vanilla for the most part in the preseason. You saw that with the offense, especially early on. That was not a 49er game plan offense by any means, but yeah, there's some game planning. You may not go crazy with your coverages, things like that. But like I will say this, one thing that showed up on film for the Raiders defensive side is they were rolling coverages pre and post snap, which I think is a little bit more than what most teams would do. So yeah, I'm not sure how much they game plan. You would think there would be some game planning for sure, but there we go. All right, let's talk about high picks, low production. So the 49ers had 3 third-round picks, essentially. One of them, I thought Jair Brown actually played decent. You didn't hear his name a lot, but that's a good thing if you play in the secondary. Unless you're making a great play, we don't really want to hear about you a lot. I think there were some little things that he did well also that flashed. But then you get into Cam Latu, who damn near dropped the only pass thrown to him and then fumbled. And then Jake Moody, who I want to remind you, between you and a super chat, people wanted me to apologize to Moody just last Tuesday. And I stood my ground and I said, I'm not apologizing until he proves he can be a top 5 kicker in the league. I want Moody to apologize to me now. Where's my apology?
Who did I mention when I mentioned Moody? What kicker in the league did I bring up last week as well?
Oh, you were talking about the best kicker in the league, arguably the best kicker of all time.
You want to know what his first preseason game he went?
Oh, I would love to.
1 for 4.
So he made one, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
So he made a kick, though?
He missed 3.
But he made one?
How many did Moody miss?
But he made one, right? I'm just kidding.
He didn't get as many opportunities. What I'm saying is, just based off of the first preseason game, all the greats have some jitters. He went.
25% is more than 0, right? I just want to make
You
sure
are
that we're on
right.
this.
You are right. But hey,
Okay.
at the end of the season, we are going to have a segment where Jesse has to apologize to Jake Moody because Jake Moody is going to come in clutch and win a couple games for the 49ers.
All right, I hope so. Okay, then let's talk about Cam Lawson.
Oh yeah, look, we one thing we know about the 49ers is they gonna miss on some 3rd round picks. All right, gonna miss on some 3rd round picks. There's gonna be some 3rd round picks that don't make it to the next season. Trey Sermon. There's gonna be some 3rd round picks that might not even make the team. Ambry Thomas, although he started balling out a little bit. There's going to be some 3rd round picks that never see the field. Jalen Hurd, right? So they gonna miss on some 3rd round picks, and they definitely are keeping the streak alive because, look, don't judge a book after a few games or whatever, but I haven't heard one thing good about Cameron Latu this whole offseason. There's been one consistent message about Cameron Latu. The boy don't catch the ball when it's in his hands. So he's continued to show that every single game, every single practice. So, look, I mean, they're being consistent. The 49ers, one thing about an organization is you want to see some consistency. They have that consistency in the 3rd round. They're going to miss on some 3rd round picks.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, I think it of course, it's way too early to write off Latu. If they sneak him onto the practice squad, maybe just because of roster politics, they keep him on the active roster. I don't know what they're going to do with him, but definitely about as rocky of a start as you possibly could have between Latu and Moody. Now, good thing is for Moody, he bounced back today in practice, had a really good practice from what it sounds like. That's great to see, but he's got to next week. That's another thing I'm looking for. I hope that he's able to make the kicks that are given to him and he can bounce back because kicker's the weird one for me, Sunil. I actually worry more long-term about Moody than I do about Latu in this sense. When you're a position player, you have time. You potentially have time to develop, at least, 1 season, 2 seasons, what have you. When you're a kicker and you are essentially a skill-based player that's kind of on the team, but not really, your shelf life can be really, really short. Mm-hmm. And you add in the fact that kickers are just interesting. I liken them to baseball players. I talked about this Sunday with Rohan, but baseball players are kind of weird creatures of habit. They've got their rituals that they go through. They put the bubble gum on the cap. They do the weird rally cap thing. Kickers are the same way. They've got their weird things that they go through, and everything has to go just right. And if it doesn't, they can get the yips really quick. We saw it last year with Marr for the Cowboys. He was one of the best kickers all season long, and then all of a sudden, he just completely fell apart. You've seen it happen in the NFL multiple times with kickers. It's just one of those weird situations. So for Moody, I just want to see him bounce back next week, make his field goals. And if he misses, like maybe he barely misses, something like that. But I want to see it happen quick, because if he goes 0 for 2 again next week, I really would start to be concerned that maybe, just maybe, he's in his own head already, and that would not be good.
No, I agree. And my boy's gonna bounce back. They're only gonna miss on 1 3rd round pick this year.
Fair enough. All right. He's already, you hear that, Cameron Latu? He's already written you off. Ink Talk TV says, what if the Eagles didn't let Hurts develop? I don't know. They would not have made a Super Bowl last year is probably my guess. And they wouldn't be the number one team in the NFC going into this season. It would be my guess as well. I don't think it would be going good in Philadelphia if they didn't let him develop, for sure. All right. Speaking of letting quarterbacks develop, Trey Lance played football kind of on Sunday, just like the rest of the 49ers. I don't know what that was, but he was on the field. He was throwing balls around, good and bad. What is your perspective on Trey Lance? What is your takeaways from the game on Sunday?
So I don't want to go through, specific plays and
no, you don't have to.
All that
just
kind of
overall
stuff. Yeah, because I think, you're way better. You got the all 22 and you broke it down. This is the thing. So I've been a huge Trey proponent, and we've always been pretty much on the same page when it comes to Trey Lance and believing that, hey, he could turn into the guy, a guy in this league and be somebody that the 49ers can see as their franchise quarterback moving forward. And I'm not necessarily saying he can't be that guy. This is the thing, what I say about Trey Lance. I don't know if this is the situation where he's going to be able, like the situation is conducive for his skill set to be able to be successful. What I mean by that is Trey Lance has been given opportunities where the team is like, you need to show me something like a level up. Show me a different level than the quarterbacks that we have here. Separate yourself and we'll give you this opportunity. And he's never been able to do that, right? And that's not necessarily saying it's fair and all this kind of stuff, but that's the situation that he's in. He came into a situation that had a quarterback in Jimmy Garoppolo that had taken the team to a Super Bowl. So, and that year they went to an NFC Championship game. Next season, he was given the first starting, role, and he got injured, and unfortunately, season-ending injury, and then the third string quarterback ended up being Brock Purdy, aka Willie Beeman, and then he kind of lost his first his starting role through that. Now preseason he had the opportunity to show us how much he's improved, to be that decisive and at least be like, dang, this guy could ball. So there's a conversation about whether or not he can at least make that leash for Purdy shorter. And he hasn't done it. It reminds me a lot of that San Diego joint practice when he was a rookie, where he had that opportunity. If he separated himself from Jimmy G, because Jimmy G wasn't having the best offseason either, if they just saw something that is like, yeah, we could get behind this guy, and he wasn't able to do it. And Jesse, this is the third year now, and each year I haven't seen that. We've really been trying to dig deep. Oh, here's a flash, here's a flash, here's a flash. But we haven't seen that complete game where he separated himself for us to be like, yeah, he should be the starter. It's still based off of potential and upside. But I'm getting to the point where it's like, yo, man, we got to see it at some point. You got a guy like Jordan Love who hasn't gotten any real starting roles over there in Green Bay. He's coming out and looking like a guy that people are like, oh my God, maybe we got another quarterback. And then we haven't seen that in Trey Lance quite yet. We've seen that in flashes, but as far as a whole game, that's what my take was on Trey Lance. I really expected a lot more from him, even though I know it was an uphill battle. Like it's not like he had a lot of weapons around him or a lot of talent around him, but it just didn't look like he was. He didn't give me enough to be like, yeah, that's why he should be starting over Purdy.
Oh, for sure. I agree with that. So then it's a week-to-week league. What if next week he does give you that? Then what?
Then it would be the first time ever that he's done that.
Okay.
And I would love it. Obviously, I would love it. But I'm now after year 3, and we've seen these. And like I said, it's not like he's had 17 straight games of opportunity to do this. we're talking about a handful. I'm talking about 3 or 4 opportunities, really, right? But unfortunately, in this situation, he has to step up because of what the makeup of the team is, and he just hasn't done that. And it's not that I don't think he could be successful. I don't know if he's mentally built for this type of situation where he could just elevate his game. It just doesn't seem like he can do that. He needs like that. Give him a year or 2 full time as number 1 in a situation where he can make mistakes and not that much pressure. I'm just not seeing that what he does on the microphone as far as the poise and all that kind of stuff isn't translating to me in the field, where I'm seeing that same competitive level of, showing out when he needs to show out type of thing.
Okay, so let's take it this route then. Let's say that Trey Lance doesn't show any improvement over the next couple preseason games, like none at all. He looks like he looked on Sunday, or he starts getting worse even. All right, so now we're out on Trey Lance. Okay, what about Sam Darnold, who I don't think either of us have trusted based off of what we've seen him do in football? Mm-hmm. This quarterback room where a lot of people have hyped it up all offseason about how good the quarterback room is, all of a sudden doesn't look that great. And now you've got Brock Purdy coming off of a major injury with expectations of the world on his shoulders. He's throwing a pick a day in practice. We talk about separating. I understand that he was the starting quarterback. He was always going to be the starting quarterback unless he fell on his face, which is what I've been saying. And then you heard Kyle Shanahan basically say the same thing, like he would have to fall completely apart in practice. I kept saying it's all about Brock Purdy and what he doesn't do versus what the other quarterbacks potentially will do in order to take over at number 1. And Kyle Shanahan echoed those sentiments. So that being said, though, it's not like Brock Purdy has been out here lighting it up post-injury here. And in a joint practice where Kyle said that was more important to him as far as evaluation goes for his players than what the preseason game was, what is the actual concern that maybe they don't have a quarterback at all that's worth a damn? Like, when do we start to get to that point? Because Purdy's not separating himself from Trey Lance or Sam Darnold either. And it's funny, I'm going to bring this up real quick, just based off of practices. So it was like Eric Crocker, Steph Sanchez, Rohan, myself. We were all in a space like after the week that I spent at practice, and we were all asked the same question. Not based off of what we've seen to this point in their careers, but just based off of practices. Keep one or start one, bench one, cut one. And almost all of us to a T said, well, based off of just the practices, Purdy might be the one getting cut. So it's not like he's out here balling out so far either post-injury. Like that it becomes a concern if he's not the guy, because if Trey Lance is well, let's just go down the path that I'm sure a lot of the chat would love us to go down. Let's concede the fact that Trey Lance is absolute trash. He's a bust. All the things that people want to call him. He is those things. Well, Sam Darnold, we know what he pretty much is right now too. He's also not a very good quarterback, because Trey Lance is the only one, as bad as he was on Sunday, that actually got that team in scoring position. So it's not like Sam Darnold's very good either, and we've seen him for 56 games. So now it's all on Brock Purdy, and if he's not what y'all think, this team could really be in some serious trouble.
So I'm the wrong person to ask, and I'll tell you why, Jesse. I had one take last season that I was ridiculed for, knives at my throat, as the true reason why this team went on their streak and why this offense looked so good. You remember what that take was. There's one player that I said was
CMC.
I never believed it was a quarterback.
Yeah. I
never believed it was Jimmy G. I never believed it was Brock Purdy. That was y'all. And not you, y'all, but just y'all. Yeah. I said, if CMC gets injured, this offense isn't going to be anything, no matter who that quarterback is. And that's my same take now. None of these quarterbacks ever look like the guy, to be honest. CMC makes this offense extremely easy for whomever plays quarterback for this team. As long as CMC is healthy, I think we have a shot. I think we have a shot to be elite. It doesn't matter if the quarterback, if the name on the back says Purdy, Darnold, or Lance. As long as CMC is in that backfield, I am confident. The minute I didn't think any of these quarterbacks can put the team on their shoulders and win a whole bunch of games. I just thought that they could, hey, the lanes will be much more open when CMC is there and Debo is there and Kittle is there and Ayuk is there. Kyle Shanahan's play calling is going to make it extremely easy to see wide open lanes and things like that. The defense will be elite enough to keep the score low enough to where you just need 21 to 28 points to be able to win a game. And I think that's just going to be the same way that this team wins this season as well. There was a lot of hype that we finally found a franchise quarterback. We haven't. I don't think any of these guys are a franchise quarterback. But as long as CMC is in that backfield, I've said that all last season. I've said it all this season as well, this offseason as well. I put that tweet up right after the preseason game. This just further confirms to me that this offense is CMC and doesn't matter who the quarterback is. And I continue to believe that to this day.
So you think as long as CMC is on the field, they should be in contention is basically where you're standing on the whole thing.
These quarterbacks are going to look much better when
sure
CMC. Yeah, that's what I think.
Okay.
Everybody looks like a probable franchise quarterback when you got CMC in the backfield, Debo and Ayuk on the outside, and Kittle as your tight end, and Trent Williams as your left tackle.
Yeah, that's totally fair. All right. Yeah, and here's the thing. I do think I still stand by kind of what I'm not panicking on Trey Lance. Like I know a lot of people are like, people are either switching up or people that. Here's what's funny, and I have to say this because I know it to be true. And I was texting multiple people before the game on Sunday, and I said, you know what the narrative is if he plays bad. Like we know that he's going to get buried, but you also know what the narrative is if he plays good. If he played good, the narrative is it's just preseason. Like there was no winning for Trey Lance on Sunday. Now, obviously, the worst of the two options is playing bad versus playing good, right? But there was no winning. He could have been damn near perfect. And everybody would be like, it's preseason. Who cares? Not a big deal. Like everybody would have glossed over it. It would not have even been a blip on the radar until you saw what they wanted to see, which is him failing. Like that's what people want to see. And they're waiting for it because they want the confirmation bias. So
they want to do their narrative.
I'm not out on it.
But I do want to ask you something, Jesse, because
yes, sir.
Because I know you're reasonable, and we all, new information comes, and we all have the should have the ability to change opinions. Are you as confident as you were on draft day to 3 years now and seeing what the product is of Trey Lance, that you're as confident? Because I remember when we initially talked, you thought his ceiling could be a top 7 quarterback, right? That's what you felt like. This is what the 49ers can get if Trey Lance does everything the way to get to his optimum level. Do you still have that same confidence, and do you think it's fair where my take is, where it seems like Trey doesn't elevate himself in the moments that he needs to?
No, I think both can be true. I actually think that your take is very fair. I don't think that he has elevated in those moments. I think he's done enough to it's the same thing, right? Show flashes, show areas of opportunity, show flashes, show areas of opportunity. Every game that he's played in, preseason or regular season, for the most part, you see the same thing. Starts out slow, starts to pick up pace. And then, unfortunately for him, once he's picked up the pace, he doesn't get to play again. And so now it's like he's starting from ground zero again. And so he starts out slow and then he picks up pace. And then there's no game to see if that pace can continue up. Like we just don't get to see that second game to see if it continues. Now, we saw Chicago was like, okay, maybe going into Seattle, it started out pretty decent, but then that was it. It was a couple plays and they were out of it. So my concern the whole time, it's funny because I still believe that Trey Lance can be that guy, can be that talent, but I never was sure if he could do it in San Francisco, to the point to where I said, Shanahan and Trey Lance is either going to be the biggest disaster pairing or it's going to be the best masterpiece that Shanahan has ever painted. Like, there was no in between for me. And I had hoped that they would play him week 1, year 1, and they would develop him properly. And then they didn't. And I'm like, okay, well, as long as he gets year 2, then they can still be on track. Well, they were going to give him year 2, and then he got hurt, right? That's not I don't agree with how they played him, but that's not really anybody's fault. He did get hurt, okay? So now, all of a sudden, that development in year 1 and year 2 are gone. I don't disagree with the decision to play Brock Purdy. Like, I understand where they're at in year 3 and why they've just like, listen, we've kind of run out of time. You do have to show us something now, fair or unfair. I understand that aspect of it. To me, my gripe is more with year 1, really, because I felt like the moment you take him, that is your investment. That's your priority. And they decided not to go that route. And that is where the mistake was made. And unfortunately, things have gotten worse since then because they didn't take the opportunity when they had it. So, yes, I do think that Trey Lance still is that talent. I do not feel confident that it's going to happen here. I think it's impossible to feel confident. I mean, what's the path? The path is Brock Purdy has to get hurt or play really, really bad. And as you just laid out, first of all, I'm not going to even talk about injury or anybody getting hurt. That is bad mojo. I'm not going to go that route. And the other possibility is him playing awful. And I've always thought Brock Purdy was pretty good like coming out of college. So I don't think he's going to play awful, especially with these weapons. I just don't think he's the franchise answer long term. Yeah. But I definitely think he can be the answer right now. And that's where we're at. So I don't expect to see a path for Trey Lance to get onto the field to ever put multiple games back to back in a San Francisco 49er uniform. I don't think that the possibility is there. And so now it becomes, what do the 49ers do? Do they do right by him and trade him, knowing that they're not going to get him reps anyways? Do they continue to hang on to him? I don't know. I have no idea what the future holds for Trey Lance. But I also know this, that a lot of people really think they have shit figured out with Trey Lance. It's still way too early for that. And again, if he plays well next week, all of this, the sky is falling, he's garbage, he's this, he's that. Now that we've established, right, the baseline is this. Everybody that said Trey Lance is garbage, they've already established that preseason means something. So if he comes out and plays well next week, I want to make sure that everybody that says he's garbage has a different tune and is like, okay, well, preseason matters. Because now you don't have the out of saying preseason doesn't matter. And I don't know if he's going to play well, but if he does, we've established it matters. All right. So let's just make sure that we're stay consistent there. That's all I ask. Sorta hungry with a sketchy, bloody hand picture says, will Lance just be Jordan Love? I don't know what Lance is going to be, especially in San Francisco. I think we answered your question. Sorta hungry. I think we just did a good job of answering your question without even realizing that was the question that was coming up. Bass Spokane says, a lot of folks saying it's year 3, but really it's a year of injury. I see what you did there. Was that a little rhyme scheme you got there? Okay, that's good. It's good. I'll take it. Flav says, Jesse, Purdy's a gamer. Okay, I'm going to stop him right here.
Because he said like Jimmy was, and that part is
like yeah. Actually, I should stop him after this next sentence. Like Jimmy was. Sure he was. So let's separate Purdy and Jimmy, first of all. Here's the thing. I agree that Purdy's a gamer. And I've talked about his mental capacity and how that's his biggest strength and all those things. I also think that it's a lot of hubris to assume that Brock Purdy is the same exact player that he was when he walked off the field in in San Francisco after that Dallas game when he got a serious injury. And we've seen that in college, he's a questionable decision maker. That was my one biggest gripe with him coming out of college. That's why I had him as a 3rd-round talent and not a 1st-round talent. Because if his decision making was on point, he might have been a late 1st-round talent, in my opinion. But he had a lot of Jimmy qualities. When I say qualities, not good ones, where he will make a boneheaded throw here or there. And I talked about it very early on with him playing, that was my biggest concern. Can he keep control of those decision-making things. And we saw it creep up in games. Fortunately for him, it didn't cost him anything because a lot of those picks didn't end up being actual picks, much like Trey Lance on Sunday, right? So now we've got this established. In college, he was a bit of a boneheaded decision maker. And now in practice for the whole offseason, he's done that again. So is Brock Purdy the guy that we saw in college with that decision making and in practice? Or is he more the 8-game Brock Purdy? And now coming off of an injury, we can just guarantee he's going to pick up exactly where he left off? I guess. Maybe he can. Maybe he can. With this roster around him, maybe he can. But maybe he can't. And if he doesn't pick up and put up 30 points against the Steelers and look unstoppable and do all those things, then where do we go? You know what I mean? So I'm just saying, I think it's a bold strategy to assume that he's just going to be that guy again immediately. I'm not sure of that. Darnold is also much better than Trey. Based off of what, man? Based off of fucking what? Like, that's my question to you about Darnold. What? In the 56 starts, he's been a turnover machine. In college, he was a turnover machine. Based off of what? Sam Darnold hasn't been better than him all offseason. Sam Darnold had 8 pass attempts and damn near threw an interception himself in that game. Sam Darnold-led offense didn't move the ball at all. So based on what? Like, I understand that you're not a Trey guy, and I'm willing to concede for this conversation that Trey is not that guy. Like, let's just concede that for right now for this conversation. Sam Darnold's not that guy either. Trust me, Sam Darnold is also not that guy. It's not if Trey's not the guy, then Sam can be. No. It's possible that Trey, Sam, and Brock are all not the guy. Then what do we do? I know you love him, but you got to move on.
We'll be fine.
I'll move on when I'm ready to move on. And when I've actually seen him put together a full season plus, then I'll move on from that conversation. Until then, I'm not budging. There's no reason to. It's still the same situation. Haven't seen enough. Incomplete. That's where I'm at. Brian says Trey needs a fresh start with a franchise that will embrace his development. # free Trey. Ink Talk TV says, you think if Purdy gets benched, they storm league? That's actually really funny. Hold on a second. Let me get rid of these other comments so I don't re-pull them up. Flav says, why? Because last offseason you were so impressed with his practice, and this year you're not. He's not a flashy player. He's not going to wow you ever. That's not him. I'm just saying wait until the game. Listen, I'm not saying panic based off of practice. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying what if. Like, let's try to fast forward. What if Brock Purdy after the injury is not the same? One thing we didn't see in those games for the most part, yes, every quarterback makes bad decisions. Brock Purdy was a pretty sound decision maker for the most part in those games last year. What I'm saying is in college, he was not. In practice, he has not been. So for a big chunk of what we've seen, he has not been a great decision maker. And for a small sample size, he was. Which player is he? Maybe he is that 8-game flash where he is a good decision maker. Maybe the weapons around him make it easier to make those decisions, which they're going to be here this year. So that thing is good. Or maybe just maybe, he's more of the guy we saw in college and more of the guy we've seen in practice. And if that is the case, it's worrisome. Because if Trey Lance is garbage and Sam Darnold, the 49ers are not winning a Super Bowl. Stevo says, I heard Trey played bad because Trent tipping plays. Nice. He was on the sideline with an earpiece tipping plays. That's good. That's actually really funny. All right, let's get into Shanahan. So one of the things that we brought up was Brock Purdy. And I think there's 2 interesting things happening here with Shanahan right now. The first one is this, and we've talked about this a little bit in the past, but we'll quickly get through it again. I threw out a tweet yesterday and said, I refuse to blame Brock Purdy if the 49ers don't win a Super Bowl. I don't care what it looks like. Like, if Brock Purdy comes out and looks awful, completely regresses, the elbow's not healed, he's not any good, and the 49ers are terrible because of it, I am not going to blame Brock Purdy. I'm not going to put this Super Bowl on the shoulders of Brock Purdy. Kyle Shanahan has made a decision to go with a quarterback, which I've been wanting him to do for forever. And I'm glad he's doing it with the conviction he's doing it with. But you've sat here and said that you have the best roster in football multiple times after losing in Super Bowls and NFC championship games. You just needed a quarterback, and now you've got the real deal. So if you have the real deal at quarterback and you have the best roster in football, then the only reason you don't win a Super Bowl is not Brock Purdy's fault. Kyle has to be the one that is culpable in taking that accountability. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, and I always say this so that everybody knows, you know, I'm a self-proclaimed Shanistan. I'm a big fan of Kyle Shanahan. I always take the positive outlook when it comes to him, but I've been pretty consistent with the one fair criticism about Kyle Shanahan that it's irrefutable is his inability to solve this quarterback room, have that franchise, quote unquote, quarterback solved in his tenure. He's had, you know, he's had what now 6 years to be able to figure that out. I still don't think he's figured it out, even in Brock Purdy, who I think is a solid quarterback, but he's not somebody that I'm looking at that elevates the team and takes them to a new level where you could put it on his shoulders and he's going to go out there and win you games like a Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Hurts. He's not that caliber of quarterback, right? And if they go through this, you know, this sort of like Trey Lance, you know, gets traded or cut after a few years, and with Purdy, it's still the same NFC championship games and not making it to the Super Bowl, not winning the Super Bowl in the next, I would say, 3 years with Purdy. Yeah, at that point, you know, Kyle Shanahan's starting to look more like Eagles version of Andy Reid, San Diego Chargers version of Marty Schottenheimer, where these guys that, you know, the team always looks competitive and, you know, too good to be like, hey, they can't win it, but not good enough to like always be winning it. And, you know, and it would be Kyle Shanahan's fault because ultimately I think that he's had the freedom and the autonomy to be able to solve this in a multitude of ways, whether it be in free agency, through trade, and now through the draft. And if he can't win it with now all of these guys are his guys, right? You know, he's got to take the blame for that. I hope that in the next 3 years we get number 6 and maybe number 7. but yeah, like I think that's a fair criticism.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not going to put it on the shoulders of a 23-year-old quarterback. I think that would be unfair to do. And so obviously the season could play out in a million different ways. Maybe they get injured a ton. And I'm not saying, first of all, we don't know how the season's going to end. Okay?
Right.
So I'm not predicting that it's going to be bad. I'm also not saying that it for sure 100% is going to be all Shanahan. What I am saying is at no point are you going to hear me say it's Brock Purdy's fault. I'm just not willing to do it. I don't think it would be fair. So I'm not going to go that route. If I have to choose between was it Shanahan's fault or Purdy's fault, I'm going with Kyle Shanahan. Like the time is now. And
you're assuming that, and we want it that like everybody's playing, right? That like you're assuming that it's the team, right? Like
yeah, of course.
If all these quarterbacks, if we're starting a Josh Johnson, like I don't know if that's Shanahan's fault at that point, but hopefully it won't get to that point again.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, like I said, if it goes crazy, sure. Wavewire says Flav's right about a lot, dare I say. Okay, so We don't know what Trey Lance is. That's one.
It's the okay so for me.
Hold on.
Whenever Jesse goes looks up and then says okay so, it's about to be epic. So I just wanted to point that out for the people that haven't seen that.
He's already been wrong about Jimmy Garoppolo, right? For 2 years, I heard him say that Jimmy Garoppolo was the real deal. So if anybody between Flav and I has some cachet to get one wrong, even if I'm wrong about Trey, then he better be right about Sam Darnold and Purdy. Because if he's wrong about either one of them, now he's got 2 wrong. Like, he's already in the hole against me. If this is a competition between Flav and I and who the fuck is right, Flav is down 0-1 already with Jimmy Garoppolo. Then he hopped off the Jimmy Garoppolo bandwagon, went over to Purdy's, and then is backing that up with Sam Darnold in case Purdy ain't the guy. Then he'd be like, well, yeah, but now Sam. Can't be Trey. It's got to be Sam. Pay attention. Flav, listen, Flav may act a fool in these chats. He's a very smart guy. He knows exactly what he's doing. This is a game for Flav. But Flav is literally pinned himself around every player, every quarterback that has been on this roster, not named Trey Lance. So he might go 0 for 3, and I might be 0 for 1, but I'm not as wrong as Flav still. Sorry. Pay attention to what Flav's doing. Don't get outsmarted by Flav. He's a smart guy, but come on, man. Justin Smitley, I wanted to bring this one up as well, says, you guys obviously don't know who Sam Darnold is. No, I'm pretty sure I know who he is. You should check out the Rose Bowl game. Oh, okay. I mean, on that, that's a few years ago. The dude's got some serious talent. Justin, here's the thing. I agree, by the way, that he has a ton of talent. My question mark with Sam Darnold is not a talent level. I know that he's got a lot of talent. However, he's a poor decision maker. He has been forever. And for me, about 2 months ago, we did quarterback traits, top 5 quarterback traits. And I had decision making either 1 or 2 is my most important trait. Because you can have all the talent in the world, but if you can't overcome poor decision making, that talent's not going to mean anything. He's a piss poor decision maker. We can talk about the talent around him. You can say, well, he had to force a lot of footballs because of the talent around him. But then you go look at his last game that he played with CMC and DJ Moore, which are pretty talented players last time I checked. And he goes like 45% passing, 3 interceptions, and no touchdowns. And that was in start like 48 of his career. He's a bad decision maker. I'm sorry. That's who he is as a football player. Now, I do believe that he can play his best football under this team with this roster. I believe that. But that also doesn't make him a good player. Like, just because he can play good football here for a season with this talent around him, he's not all of a sudden a good decision maker and a good player. I'm sorry. He's just not. He's not. And what you're seeing from him in practice is a lot of short passes, getting the ball out quick, because he's trying to avoid even making those mistakes. Like, he just won't even throw it downfield with regularity in practice because he just doesn't want to make a mistake. He knows what he is. He's a bad decision maker. Very talented. No argument there. Flav says, Jess, look at Sam's composure compared to Trey. You really don't see the difference. The game still looks so fast for him. You're watching with your heart. I'm not watching with my heart. I gave him a C-. There's a lot that he needs to improve on. I'm not denying that in any sort of fashion. I would expect a guy with 56 starts in his career to look a little bit more composed. But he's still an awful decision maker. And there's nothing that he's going to put on film this year that is going to change my mind about that. I'm sorry. We've got too much of a sample size. We've got a full college career, and we've got a many, many games in the NFL. I believe he is who he is. Super talented. He definitely can look the part at times. He's an awful decision maker, and it's going to take multiple seasons of him not being that before I change my mind on who he is. Jesse Wade says, can we talk about the true cornerstone of the franchise, please? Sign Bosa, for the love of God. This team doesn't beat Pittsburgh without Bosa. Yeah, we talked about it. That was the first thing that we talked about, man. You nail on the head. There was a reason we let off with the Bosa topic. It is the most important topic for sure. All right. Let's end on this one. We've talked a lot about quarterback in Trey Lance. Brock Purdy obviously comes into the conversation because he is the starter of this team. He is now fully cleared for practice and really the games. Like, there is no more limitations on what they're doing with Brock Purdy. What do you think about this? How do you feel about this? Knowing the offseason that they embarked on, how long it could have lingered. Just overall, how do you feel about him being fully ready to go this early?
Yeah, I mean, this is great news for anybody that's a 49er fan. This is great news.
For sure.
We obviously finally have a pecking order definitive. I mean, I think we've had this throughout the year, but now it's like, for sure, Kyle Shanahan has come out and made some very strong statements about Brock Purdy being position number one as a starting quarterback. So if he's the guy, he's going to be the number one. You want him getting all the reps. You know what I mean? At this point, personally for me, Trey and Sam Darnold, if they get not that many reps, I'm not worried about it because ultimately we ride it or die with Brock Purdy at this point, right? So for me, for him to be healthy, to be able to go, you know, all the practices in a row without those mandatory rest days and whatnot, I think is great because clearly, you know, once again, I mentioned another fair criticism on Shanahan is week one, the team, and even the beginning of the season, the team isn't at optimal levels. They don't come out swinging. They don't come out scaring people. It usually takes, you know, 6 or 7 games before they get into that mold. And it would be great for them to come out and really take advantage and win, you know, be up in that first place position in the beginning half of the season as well. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is Brock Purdy work out a lot of the kinks that you're talking about as far as decision making, as far as you know, some of these throws that are turning into pick sixes and interceptions and things like that. Get those out of the way because ultimately we know that Brock Purdy is a caliber of quarterback that this team and this system can win with the talent that is on this team. We've seen it, right? He just needs to be able to play at least at that level, if not take another leap forward if possible.
Yeah, definitely. I think with all the array of possibilities that could have happened this offseason, for the surgery being pushed back, what that could have done. First of all, when he started training camp, that was a huge, huge step in the right direction. And then now that he's fully cleared, basically, potentially, I mean, if it would have dragged on a full 6 months, we would have been into September. This is definitely good news, especially because he is the guy that Kyle Shanahan has chosen right now to be the quarterback of this team. So the fact that he is here and he's healthy and ready to go, really ahead of schedule, I mean, is a testament to not only the hard work that he put in, but also those surgeons, those rehab guys, everybody. Like, they all deserve some credit to get Brock Purdy to this point. He deserves the ultimate credit because really he's the one that had to put it in. He had to go through that rehab, and I know rehab is a mother. If anybody has ever had a major surgery and had to go through rehab where you can't use a limb, whether a leg, an arm, what have you, even a hand, it's disastrous. Like, it is awful. So the fact that he put himself through that and got himself ready for this point is awesome news for him and the San Francisco 49ers. So I definitely think he needs to be applauded for that. No doubt about it.
Definitely pause for Jesse.
What did I say?
He's the one who put it in.
Oh,
pause.
No, I'm going to let it ride. No pause. No pause.
Pause again on the let it ride. Bruh.
Sam says, Jesse, to be fair, you said you knew about Trey Lance. Did I ever say like 100% for sure I knew? Maybe I did. Even if I did, we still don't know. And even you're saying most likely you're wrong, meaning we don't know for sure. So by those facts, maybe you're also wrong about Sam. Something to think about. Listen, what I'm saying is we know a hell of a lot more about Sam Darnold than we do Trey Lance. Like, that is factual. Now, however you want to look at that, some people think that's a good thing. Sam Darnold, Flav thinks Sam Darnold is, I don't know what he thinks Sam Darnold is. It's not what I think he is. Let's put it that way. So some people look at that as a good thing. Just because you have a lot of games or a lot of experience, if the experience is mostly bad, I don't necessarily put that over non-experience. Like if you have a lot of experience and it's good experience, sure. Like I'll take that. But if you have a lot of experience and it's not good experience, then I'm not with it. Like I said, if Sam's going to prove me wrong, he's going to have to put together 2 seasons where he's not turnover prone. So we're going to need to see it this year and we're going to need to see it next year. And if you can't do that, which I'll take that bet for sure, then I'm not changing my mind on Sam Darnold. We have too much film that says otherwise. And it's not just the interceptions. I mean, this man fumbles the football like I don't even know what. And one of the things that I'll say about quarterbacks, I don't care what the talent level is around you. You're either a sound decision maker or you're not. You don't have to be a bad decision maker just because you don't have a ton of talent around you. That's not the way it works. You can still make sound decisions. You can still throw the ball away when you have the opportunity to throw the ball away. You can still take a sack when you should take a sack instead of throwing it into double coverage. You don't have to be a bad decision maker because the talent around you is not that great. And even when the talent has been pretty good, CMC and DJ Moore, it hasn't looked that great always. So I think I've seen enough of Sam Darnold. I feel much more comfortable about saying what Sam Darnold is versus saying what Trey Lance is. That much is very, very clear.
And I think we've only really had maybe 1 or 2 examples of a quarterback that has been let go from multiple teams and actually like been a guy that could lead a team. And we've not even really seen lead a team that deep, right? There's that, Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think, is a guy who, has been able to show he could get a team to the playoffs, but they were never he was never a quarterback that could really be somebody that you're scared of necessarily in the playoffs. And then we see Geno, right? Geno with the Seahawks, yet to be seen how far he could take that team. I think last year they obviously overachieved, and this year they have a lot more talent on that team. So we'll see how far he could take it. But, Sam Darnold was let go by the Jets, let go by, the Panthers. So it's not like Jesse's the only one that is out on Sam Darnold. NFL GMs, NFL coaches, NFL scouts have been out on Sam Darnold as well. And if he could, I don't think he even came to this position necessarily to win the starting job with the 49ers and all that kind of stuff. I think he just wanted to actually be on a team that was surrounded about winners and work with a coach like Kyle Shanahan and kind of just rejuvenate his career, much like Mitch Trubisky did when he went to Buffalo that one year. Didn't really play with Buffalo, but was able to, go there in Pittsburgh and have a chance to start for that team. I think that's more what Sam Darnold is trying to do versus really be like a contender for a starting role here with the 49ers.
Yeah, for sure. Sam says the fact that they don't see, I do see how bad those teams are. I'm not saying that they are great teams. That's not what I'm saying. I am simply saying that I think there's one skill set that translates no matter what, and it's decision making. And he has poor decision making. And he had it on a good team in college in the USC Trojans. He's had it with good weapons around him in the NFL. And I know that there's a guy that says, go watch the Rose Bowl from 7 years ago or however long ago that was. I'll take my chances on the 56 starts I've seen in the NFL and his poor decision-making there over one game in the Rose Bowl. Again, I think he can flash at times. I think he's super talented. There is no argument there. And when you're talented, you're going to flash. When you're talented, you're going to make a throw that wows people. When you're talented, you're going to look good for short stints, a couple games here or there. Ultimately, though, if you're a bad decision maker, that always overrides your talent. And I just think he's a bad decision maker. And I would say the burden of proof is on you to prove me wrong. And I don't know how you're going to do that when the man has 90 combined potential turnovers in the NFL in 56 career games. I would encourage you to try to prove that he's a good decision maker with those statistics. It's not possible. And then go back to college and you'll see he has more turnovers than he had games played there too. So that's not going to do any better for you. So maybe we can get into his high school stats. Maybe we'll start watching his senior year. Maybe there's some film there that we should break down. I don't know. That's what we're going to do. Tomorrow I'll be back with a Sam Darnold senior year of high school film breakdown. so that we know how good Sam Darnold is. That's what we're going to do. And then we're going to write off a player who's played 4 games in the NFL because the kid with 56 starts is really the one that we should care about. I'm sorry, I can't do it. All right, y'all. Listen, I appreciate you for tuning in. Appreciate those that tuned in over at Sunil's channel as well. I will be back tomorrow with Grant for 49ers After Dark. And I think we should do probably a call-in show afterwards over here on Last Second Sports. So all those takes you have about Sam Darnold, Flav, if you don't want to do the super chats and you want to actually talk through things, anybody else that wants to talk through last weekend's games, what we can expect this weekend, whatever. Tomorrow will be your time to sound off after 49ers After Dark, probably around 10:30 Eastern-ish. Be ready for it. Call in. Get your takes off. Let's have conversation. Appreciate you. Peace.